Hey, it's Comax and I'm here with What If Deku Had DNA Manipulation. If you enjoy this video, be sure to like, subscribe and share the video. Alright, let's jump in. Chapter 1. Igaraki, also known as Darumi Ajiko, was looking through the results of Izuku Midoriya, a little kid with green hair who came just yesterday with his mother. The fact that he still needed to keep his cover as one of the highest-ranking members of the League of Villains infuriated him to no end. Luckily he was a patient man, he always was, his quirk allowed him to be one. It had been many years since he stopped counting his birthdays, so he could handle a few more years as a pediatrician and the board chairman of Jaku Hospital until All For One took care of All Might and he would have all the resources he could even imagine to continue his research, just as he was promised. The day was a long day, he had at least 50 patients come visit him and an extreme amount of paperwork to take care of, so it came as no surprise that it took him so long to take a look at the test results of the young green-haired kid. To say that they were interesting would be a massive understatement. His X-rays showed that his pinky toe had only a single joint, yet the boy hasn't shown any signs of his quirk yet, so he did what any other doctor would, took some blood samples and sent them on their way. This is where it started getting weird. The lab did 2 DNA tests and they were both completely different. Kaidai called to the lab and forced them to do another one and again it came slightly different. So he went to the lab himself and did the tests twice on a single sample, but again they were different. I couldn't believe his eyes, he has never seen anything like this before, not even the most extreme gene therapy could cause something like this had to be the work of the boy's quirk. But that still didn't answer the most important question, what was this quirk's function? The doctor did every possible test he could think of, but the sample did not react in any interesting or unusual way. He decided to give up and put the blood sample back into the tray. What he didn't realize was that the test tube which held the blood sample got slick from the sweat on his hand and just as he was about to put on the table, it slipped between his fingers and shattered on the ground of the lab. I cursed under his breath and reached his hand to pick up the ruined vial when suddenly he was hit by something what felt like static electricity. It was a feeling similar to one that someone gets when touching a doorknob after walking on carpet and socks. He recoiled his hand on instinct and wondered if this was the quirk purpose, to generate electricity from changes within genetic material. He picked up a dropper and took in a bit of Izuku's blood and once again repeated the test and he was once again baffled when the DNA changed even more drastically. The doctor then had the idea to compare the newest sample to his own DNA test result from a few years back. He was shocked to see how similar those two looked in just a few seconds. I spent the rest of the night making calculation after calculation and computer simulation after simulation until he found out the truth. Izuku Midoriya. Quirk. Gene manipulation. Izuku's genome constantly transforms in order to enable his body to use quirks of other people he touches. Unfortunately, this process takes about 4 years to finish, since he touches the quirk user, the changes are however permanent. The doctor was immediately reminded of All For One for his similar quirk, but there was also a major difference, excluding the substantial period Izuku needed for his quirk to work, the genes of the copied person were not harmed, allowing the potential victim the use of their quirk after the transformation. He couldn't even imagine the possibilities of what could happen if All For One took this quirk from the small child, there wouldn't be anyone strong enough to ever threaten him again if both quirks combined. They could create an entire army of extremely powerful villains. There was absolutely no way the League of Villains could pass the opportunity such as this one. 2 days later, Midoriya residence. Izuku finally fell into a deep sleep from the exhaustion caused by his crying, his mother was sitting next to his bed watching him with sadness clearly visible on her face. I am so sorry Izuku. Those words were still resonating within her head. She felt like crying again, but she held back her tears in fear of waking Izuku up again. She felt so defeated because she knew that her son just lived through the worst day of his life and there was absolutely nothing she could do to help him. She thought about fate and how cruel it could be to take the chance of being a hero from someone as pure-hearted and determined as her son. She slowly brushed his head with her fingers to ease his sleep while he lied there still clutching his favorite All Might action figure tightly in his arms, taking in slow deep breaths. After about 20 minutes Inko felt as her eyes began to close, so she leaned in and gave him a soft kiss on the cheek before leaving her son's bedroom. She fell asleep very quickly, but at that time it didn't occur to her that tiredness and emotional exhaustion weren't the only things which affected her, but also a tasteless and scentless gas slowly filling the house. After 5 more minutes 2 masked men entered the house quietly, snuck into Izuku's room, picked him up and carried him to the black SUV outside before driving swiftly away. 2 hours later, League of Villains hideout. Izuku woke up with a start. He immediately started frantically looking around himself confused by his surroundings. The room he was in could be best described as a cell with both the floor and the walls made of steel and the ceiling made of cement. There were no windows, just a metal door on the other side of the room across from his bed, which looked like it was stolen straight from a hospital. There was also a toilet in the corner of the room. Mom," he said as his hand started shaking, nearly dropping his All Might action figure. Just as the word left his mouth, a blue light on one of the walls, which he never even noticed, turned red suddenly. "Looks like the little rat's awake, you should go do something about that," said one voice from the other room. "Why the hell should it be me? I had to carry him there. It's your turn." "Ugh, fine." Izuku heard heavy steps slowly coming closer to the door and he was frozen with fear. "They will come in here and hurt me." The steps got closer. "What should I do? What would Kaken do?" The steps got even closer. Izuku looked at his hero in his arms. What would All Might do? The steps stopped on the other side of door. He wouldn't give up, he never gives up. He always fights. He quickly thought about how to defend himself when he noticed toilet tank and ran with his All Might figure to it. He gently but quickly sat his hero on the toilet before lifting the cover with all his strength and nearly falling over from the heavy weight of it, but his legs refused to give up and he braced the weight with his tiny shoulder. "Damn it. Where is that goddamn keycard? You are holding it in our left hand, idiot." "Oh right." Izuku closed his eyes and prepared for the worst. He waited for the sound of the door opening, but it never came. Instead there was a different sound. One he knew very well. Smash. Chapter 2. The entire building shook as if it was hit by earthquake. Izuku acted on instinct, let go of toilet tank cover, dove under the hospital bed and covered his head with his tiny hands, shut his eyes, just like his mother taught him. He waited there for the room around him to collapse, but that never happened, instead there came a deep voice. "Well, let's see what's behind door number 70. The room shook once again as the large metal doors were torn clean off by a massive figure clad in blue, red, white and yellow spandex. All Might peered into the cell and saw a small child covering in fear under a bed, as well as a miniature of himself sitting on the toilet in the corner. "Wait, what's that about?" All Might. He was pulled from his confusion when he heard the shaky voice and hurried closer before leaning under the bed, only to see two green orbs filled to the brim with tears staring straight back at him. He felt his heart swell up with anger as he saw the kid, yet he didn't let the negative emotion ruin his wide brave smile. "So you are kidnapping children now, all for one? Ha ha. Have no fear, because I am here," he said cheerfully as he flexed his muscles on one of his arms while using the other to lift up the bed. The small green-haired child just continued to stare at him with both his eyes and his mouth wide open. Kid, are you alright?" he said as he began waving his hand in front of the kid's face to snap him out of his shock. "Kid, can you hear HMPH?" He was stopped as the green-haired boy suddenly jumped and grabbed him around the neck in a crushing hug, or at least what he assumed was the child's version of the crushing hug. "Can I just So cute." Ashinori slowly and carefully closed his own giant arms around the little boy, ignoring the light tingle of electricity he felt as he did so. Yeah, this feeling never got old no matter how many times he lived through it, the feeling of pure adoration, respect and maybe even some kind of love he felt when helping people in danger situations. It was the one thing that kept him going even his master's death, it gave him courage, kept him determined, kept him all might. "Of course, young man, but first we have to get you out of here." The giant of a man slowly stood up while keeping one of his massive hands on Izuku's back to keep him from falling. He then walked to the toilet and pointed with his free hand at the toy still sitting on the toilet bowl. "Is this yours?" Izuku followed Toshinori's gaze and turned bright red when he realized that he left the little hero in such an embarrassing position. "Sorry, All Might." The big hero just gave him one of his signature laughs before grabbing the toy with his free hand and heading out of the cell and into mostly empty dimly lit hallways of All for One's complex hideout. Meanwhile, Gran Torino was flying from wall to wall searching for his former student, followed closely by Recovery Girl and Sir Night-Eye. "Where did that big oaf run off to?" said Recovery Girl as she was barely able to keep up with the two heroes, while both of them were surprised that she was so vital even in her old age. She was slowly getting more and more angry. First they show up at her office unannounced in the middle of the night and start banging on her door, waking all of her patients in the process, only to tell her that Toshinori has gone after All for One all by himself and that if they didn't find him, he would get injured so badly that he wouldn't be able to continue working as a pro. "We have to keep looking. If what I saw becomes true, he will surely need our help," Night-Eye responded. His grim vision was still fresh on his mind, he just couldn't get the image of All Might lying in the pool of his own blood from his head. "Yeah, listen to the fanboy, Chio. All for One is more than prepared for him," said Gran Torino as he knocked out two small-time villains the moment they came into the hallway. "Ashinori, please don't do anything stupid." 1 minute and 14 seconds later. "Where is that exit? I am sure it was this way." I have to get that kid to safety before I run into someone too dangerous. Now All Might was by no means coward, but fighting while holding a kid that couldn't be more than 5 years old in one hand and the kid's toy in the other one seemed like something so dangerous and stupid he cringed at what his teacher would do to him before he even reached the afterlife. Did you get lost, All Might? Oh crap. Before he even had time to respond, a dozen long spears made of pure energy were sent flying straight at him. Thanks to quick thinking he was able to dodge them save for the All Might doll, which got impaled through the head and stuck to the nearby wall. Oh, would you look at that. You broke the toy of a child that you're trying to protect, maybe you should save yourself the trouble and die already. All for One said as he fired a brand new set of spears straight at All Might. Toshinori didn't waste any time as he shot a Texas smash with his free hand at Shigaraki and jumped backwards before ducking behind the corner with energy spears flying straight past him. That new quirk of his will be hard to deal with. I need to close the distance, but first. Okay kid, time to get off. He said as he leaned over and tried to let go of the kid that was still hugging him, but the little boy didn't even budge. Come on kid, I can't fight with you hanging around. That's when he noticed that the boy was shivering like crazy, blinking rapidly and burning up. A seizure. All Might then forcefully tried to remove the boy in order to lay him down, but simply couldn't pry the child off. What are you? A spider monkey? Just then he heard a step from behind and felt an extreme pain shoot up his left arm. He grunted and found one of All for One's spears sticking out of his left elbow. All Might turned around and delivered a punch with his right fist to Shigaraki's chest, which sent the white-haired man flying straight through the wall. For a second Toshinori thought about going after him, but ultimately decided against it. The child needed some medical care and that had much bigger priority than revenge. And so the symbol of peace and justice did something he has never done before. He retreated after smashing a hole in the ceiling and jumping through it to the higher floor of the basement. It didn't take more than just 10 seconds of running until the sole of a white shoe made contact with his face. Gran Torino looked absolutely furious. So scary. What the hell were you thinking, you big newbie? You could have been killed. One for All would be lost forever. And is that a child? Recovery girl interrupted the old hero veteran and rushed over to All Might. I found him in a room downstairs. I think he's having a seizure, also he is sort of strangling me. Toshinori said and began to wheeze a bit from the boy's strong grip. Recovery girl gave All Might a kiss on his arm and then one to the back of Izuku's head and quickly recoiled from the feeling of static electricity rushing to her lips. Izuku immediately let go of Toshinori and fell into the awaiting arms of Sir Night-Eye, only for him to also feel a jolt travel up his right arm, yet he chose to ignore it. I'm going back. Said All Might suddenly to the surprise of everyone present. Please All Might, listen. This is not a fight you can win on your own. You will die if you fight him today. Yelled Night-Eye. I cannot allow him to escape again, not after what he did to Nana. Toshinori responded determined without any hint of fear in his voice. The group was taken over by silence. They stood there looking at each other for what felt like eternity. Until finally Gran Torino sighed and spoke up. He's right, you cannot do this on your own. I will go with you. Can't you see that this is madness? But before he could finish his sentence, Sir Night-Eye was interrupted by a loud rumble which sent the entire building shaking. He lost his balance and let go of Izuku, who was still unconscious, just as the entire floor ruptured beneath, swallowing them all into complete darkness. When Night-Eye came back to consciousness, he slowly opened his yellow eyes hidden beneath a pair of broken glasses. There were a few fires around him on the ground, illuminating the entire cavern-like area they were in. His head was throbbing painfully, and when he reached for it, he found drops of blood on his fingers, which quickly brought him from his delirious state. The hero in grey business suit slowly and painfully got back on his feet and looked himself to see Gran Torino lying a few feet from him with some debris on his back. Night-Eye walked over to him and began digging him out with his bare hands, which by the end were also bloody and shaking from exhaustion, but the little old man was still breathing and had a strong heartbeat. He looked around for Recovery Girl but couldn't find her anywhere. The wall on the other side of the room suddenly shattered as All Might's bloodied and battered body was thrown into a nearby pile of rubble, but he got up quickly and ran back through the hole that his body just created. In that room he saw Shigaraki getting closer to the green-haired boy with his hand raised and little red flames dancing on his palm. The white-haired man was just dead set on taking the little boy's quirk. Oh no you don't. Toshinori yelled with fury and readied another smash only for the villain to swiftly disappear in what could only be described as black liquid just before the punch could make an impact. All Might was caught off guard when All for One reappeared a moment later with what could only be described as extremely long sharp bones protruding from where his right arm used to be. All Might failed to react in time as the bones buried deep in his left side only to be then swiftly pulled back, leaving him with a big bloody empty hole where his guts used to be. Toshinori promptly fell on the ground clutching his side in absolute agony. You heroes are all the same. Idiotic dreamers with way too much power in their disposal. But with this child's quirk I will change that, and when I finish extracting what I need from him, I will tear him apart to bloody pieces in front of your very eyes just to show you how little of a value one's life has in this world. All for one yelled as he made his way to Izuku. Izuku's eyes were still closed when he heard slow steps approaching. He wasn't sure why, but he was filled with immeasurable dread. Then the memories came rushing back to him. He remembered waking up in the small cell, scared and alone. He remembered the horror he felt when those two men slowly got closer to the door. But he also remembered the relief and amazement he felt when he saw All Might's big smile. The steps stopped. All Might. He quickly opened his eyes only to see a white-haired man with his hand, which glowed with dark red fire, reaching for his forehead. "Go away." He weakly shouted as he grabbed the man's wrist, once again shutting his own eyes. Then came a flash of green light and probably the most disgusting sound Izuku has ever heard in his entire life. It was something between a squelch and a crack with equally disgusting noise of something wet and soft falling on the ground, which followed soon after. He opened his eyes only to see the man's hand reduced to a bloody mess, which also covered the fingers on Izuku's own hand. "Not yet. It's not your time yet. There is still more you need to do. Don't give up. You can't give up now. Breathe. Move. Get up. Fight. Protect him. Be a hero." All Might slowly got back up on his knees, then on his feet, ignoring the agonizing pain which came with his every movement. All for One's face twisted in both pain and anger as he raised his arm made of sharp bones, ready to bring it down on the little boy before him. Yet he was interrupted by a furious roar coming from behind. Just as he turned around, he witnessed All Might charging at him at full speed, roaring with some of his bloody entrails left behind him. It was an image he would always remember as the last one he ever saw with his own eyes. United States of Smash. Toshinori yelled with anger as his fist made contact with Shigaraki's skull, destroying his face and the bones beneath it, driving his head into the ground. After a few shallow breaths, All Might could feel his energy rapidly running out until he lost his balance and fell on his back right next to his arch-nemesis. He didn't even notice it when All for One's body became enveloped in black mist and disappeared. Izuku swiftly stood up and rushed over to All Might lying in a pool of his own blood. "I did this. This is all my fault." He fell onto his knees and wrapped his tiny arms around Toshinori's massive bicep. "I am so sorry, All Might. Please get up." The big hero's breathing stopped. "No, no, no. Please All Might, you can't die here." Izuku said as tears once again filled his eyes. Toshinori's heart stopped beating. Please someone, anyone help him, he's dying," Izuku said weakly and began to sob as he buried his head into his hero's shoulder. "Oh my goodness, what happened to him?" yelled Recovery Girl as she ran over to where she heard the small boy crying his eyes out. Please help," said Izuku, covered from head to toe in his hero's blood in between his sobs. She gently picked him up and sat him down a few feet away to get a closer look at Toshinori's condition. Once she saw the huge hole in All Might's belly and sternum, she immediately knew that there was absolutely nothing that could be done. Even if she used her quirk, it would only make his death faster. At that moment, Recovery Girl felt completely useless. She stood up and decided to go check on the boy. For all she knew, some of that blood on him could have been his own, and she wasn't going to lose two people due to her incompetence. But then she saw it. Movement. The wound began to slowly close itself. She was completely flabbergasted to see as the wound got smaller and smaller and fresh pink skin began to appear on the uncovered flesh, leaving a huge scar. She turned her attention back on the boy who was still crying just next to her. "What did you do?" "Izuku Midoriya. Quirk. Gene Manipulation plus Ultra." When Izuku's own quirk combined with One for All, it further strengthened his own ability. Izuku's genom can now instantly transform, which allows him to use the quirk of anyone he touches in just a few seconds. Furthermore, newly gained quirk is also further enhanced by One for All, bringing it past its natural limits. Chapter 3. Explanation. Izuku's quirk copies other quirks, but unlike Monoma, he can copy countless quirks permanently, but it also takes a lot of time to add them to his body. However, after he came in contact with All Might's quirk, which not only enhances the strength, speed and durability of its user, but also the user's own quirk, his own quirk went into overcharge, sending him into a seizure-like state. But after being kissed by Recovery Girl, his body and genom quickly stabilized, combining One for All and Gene Manipulation into a new, more powerful quirk, which not only copies quirks of people he touches instantly, but also makes them more powerful, just like One for All. So right now Izuku has All Might's version of One for All, and also better versions of Heal, from Recovery Girl, Foresight, Sir Night Eye, and All for One. This is why he was able to heal Toshinori after his face, and therefore his lips, made contact with All Might's shoulder. Izuku was just quietly sitting on a front seat of a police car. Officers were everywhere searching the entire area around Shigaraki's hideout and arresting minor villains with help of heroes that had arrived with them. The small green-haired boy caught a glimpse of paramedics loading All Might into an ambulance but quickly averted his eyes in shame before also being driven to the hospital. After being led to a shower by a few kind nurses and getting clean clothes that someone donated to the hospital, he was feeling much better even though he couldn't get the image of his hero bloody and hurt from his head. A nice tall pediatrician checked his body and concluded that the boy was completely fine save for a few scratches, which he promptly treated. "It's all my fault." He looked at the hands resting in his lap as he sat. They were still trembling and he couldn't stop them no matter what he did. He could still feel the blood on his hands. How could I hurt someone like that? Even though he was probably a villain no one deserves to. Izuku. The small boy was quickly enveloped in a tight hug by his mother. "Oh my god baby, are you okay? No one hurt you, did they?" she asked in horror as Izuku started sobbing in her embrace. "You must be the boy's mother. I am Detective Tsukauchi, we talked over the phone," said a smiling young tall man wearing a beige trench coat and a hat as he approached them calmly. "Yes, thank you so much for finding my son, I couldn't live with myself if anything were to happen to him," Inko said with tears in corners of her green eyes. "You don't need to worry, the doctor has already informed me that your son is perfectly healthy." "Oh thank God. So you must be the Izuku that I've heard so much about," the young detective said as he crouched in front of the little boy while still smiling. The child didn't react in any way, just stared blankly at the man before him. "Is All Might going to be okay?" Izuku asked sadly, to which the man's smile broadened. "Well, he regained consciousness half an hour ago and has been asking everyone the same thing, only about you, and since now I have some good news for him, why don't you come with me so you can tell him yourself?" Both Izuku and his mother looked shocked. "He isn't mad at me?" the young boy asked shyly while clutching the fabric of his new shorts, which were 2 sizes too big. The detective's face showed a look of surprise for a minute before he leaned in a bit closer to Izuku, making the boy a bit uncomfortable. "Mad? It's possible you might have saved his life with your quirk." "I saved All Might. Wait, I have a quirk." But I don't have a quirk." The detective looked a little taken aback by Izuku's answer. It was pretty common for someone to have their quirk wrongly diagnosed or misunderstood, but it has been several since he has last heard about someone being wrongly diagnosed as quirkless. Also, why would All for One kidnap someone without a quirk he could steal? It simply didn't add up at all. "Tell me Miss Midoriya, when did Izuku have his quirk examined?" "It was 3 days ago, but we've got his results just yesterday." "Why do you ask?" Inko asked troubled. The detective's smile quickly returned as he shook his head a bit. "Oh, no real reason, I was just curious." "Well then, Izuku, would you like to see All Might?" Izuku quickly nodded his head as an innocent excited smile appeared on his face. Namasa quickly waved over a fellow officer with feline head who was just walking through the hallway with a cup of coffee in his hand. "Please take them to the VIP." The officer understood and led the small family to the nearest elevator while Tsukauchi pulled out his phone through which he quickly accessed a quirk registration database and downloaded file on Izuku Midoriya. When he read it and discovered that Izuku Midoriya was indeed documented as quirkless, so Tsukauchi took a look at the person who filled the report and dialed the office. "Hi, it's me, what information do you have about Dr. Daruma Yujiko?" All Might's hospital room a minute later. "So am I fine?" Toshinori asked while sitting on his hospital bed which was straining from his enormous weight. Recovery girl was walking from one end of the room to the other still looking at the images from his CT scan. "I am not sure that fine best describes you state. Take a look at this," she said as she pushed 2 pictures into his hands. "Here is your big intestine before the incident yesterday and here after the incident." "I don't see the difference," All Might began before being slapped upside the head with rolled up papers by the angry doctor. "Of course you don't, you big oaf. Your appendix is back." "Oh hey, you're right. But I had it removed when I was 12. Toshinori could still remember the horrible pain that he felt when his parents drove him to hospital that day. "And do you remember that time when you broke your rib during your combat training? Now it's like it never even happened." Recovery girl said as she showed him another black and white picture. "But, what does this mean?" "I am not sure myself, the only thing I can tell you for certain is that your entire body shows the same improvements, you have a perfect cholesterol level and blood sugar, you have lost a few pounds, your teeth are all healthy and without a single filling, and you have the cleanest lungs and the healthiest liver that I have ever seen in someone of your age. I would even go as far as to bet my doctor's license that you are the healthiest person in this entire building including the newborns." The little energetic old lady took a deep breath as she finished talking. That kid's quirk is pretty powerful," said Toshinori as he began to scratch at his side. "Doesn't that hurt at all?" she asked looking worried. "No, it just started itching like crazy." "Let me take a look." Recovery girl said as she hurried over to him as All Might lifted up his hospital gown a bit to allow her better access to his tingly area. The youthful heroine took one look and took a step back in surprise. Even the scar is gone now. This was biologically impossible. The injury All Might suffered might cripple even most of the people who were born with super regeneration, since most of them could never even hope to regrow more than a couple of fingers, much less important organs. Just as she was about to launch into an entirely new speech about why this should be completely impossible, there was a knock on the door. "You can come in," said Toshinori as he jumped from the bed, which creaked menacingly, back to his feet so fast he nearly slipped on the polished floor. The door opened and a green-haired child he saved before and who he could only assume was the child's mother slowly and carefully walked in. Izuku gasped a little when he saw All Might standing in the room dressed in white hospital gown and light pink pants, but tears quickly filled his eyes as he let go of his mother's hand and gave All Might's muscular leg a tight hug. Toshinori's heart fluttered a little as if it was failing to comprehend this much cuteness. "Izuku, you can't do that to strangers," Inko said as she rushed over to her son with intention to pull him off the #1 hero, but before she could do anything All Might stopped her. "It's no big deal madam, I am used to it," he said with his ever-present smile. He carefully bent down and picked the child up but quickly discovered tears in Izuku's eyes and fear swiftly overtook him. "Crap, I hope I didn't hurt him." "Hey young man, what's wrong?" he asked in worry, his eyes scanning the child for any injury he might have touched. "I am so sorry," the boy forced out in between his sobs. "Sorry? What could you possibly sorry for, young Midoriya?" Toshinori asked as he softly placed the child back on the ground and took a knee before him. The emotion of pure excitement from the thought, "All Might knows my name," was quickly smashed to the dirt by the wagon of guilt still parked in the forest of shame, which was still growing inside of Izuku's head. "It's my fault that you got injured. If those villains didn't take me, you wouldn't get hurt and—" "Toot toot, stop there little one." All Might interrupted suddenly as he gently pushed the boy's nose 2 times imitating a klaxon on a steering wheel. The effect was instant, Izuku was so taken back he stopped crying and started blushing a bit. "Listen to me, young man. If it weren't for you, there is a good chance I wouldn't be here now talking to you. Believe it or not, today you and your quirk saved my life, and if that is not something to be proud about, I don't know what is," said Toshinori as he carefully patted the child's head. "Thank you All Might," whispered Izuku as a small innocent smile found its way back on his way. "Now, I believe I owe you an autograph," the big man exclaimed as he grabbed a pen and a few pages of paper. "To Izuku Midoriya, the boy who single-handedly saved my life and one of the greatest heroes of the future generation. Signed All Might." Izuku looked shocked at his hero, with his mouth slightly gaping and his eyes filled with adoration. "I can be a hero?" He took a wobbly step forward and with his shaky tiny hands, grasped the piece of paper offered to him and gave All Might one big last hug. Inko gently took her son's hand into her own. She was so proud of her little boy. Just to be acknowledged by All Might was impressive on its own, but to save said hero was simply incredible. At that moment she swore to herself that she would do anything to help her son achieve his dream, whatever it was. Just as they were about to leave the room, Izuku stopped in his tracks and turned around. "All Might, my friend Kachin has his birthday in 2 weeks, could you write another autograph for him?" Smiling Toshinori didn't even respond, he just reached for his pen and paper again. Chapter 4. Izuku couldn't sleep but really, could anyone blame him? After everything that happened yesterday, he was simply too excited to close his eyes for more than just a few seconds before quickly opening them again and gazing at every single one of the All Mights displayed in his room. The hospital decided to keep him under observation until the evening. While there, both him and his mother were visited by the nice detective who asked them to not talk about what happened in the early morning to anyone just yet to make sure that the investigation goes smoothly. Izuku felt as if he just came back from a top-secret assignment which only added to his excitement. One of the greatest heroes of the future generation. Those words still resonated in his mind, filling him with energy and determination. "If he believes in me, I can do it. But it will be super hard." At the hospital. "Are you sure about this, Night-Eye?" Toshinori asked with a bit of regret in his voice. Night-Eye has been his sidekick for many years, so it came as a shock when he was handed a resignation letter with a new costume. The man in formal clothing pushed up his glasses with one of his bandaged hands before nodding his head firmly. "I am sorry, All Might, but I just can't continue being your sidekick after what happened yesterday. Your poor judgment nearly cost us all our lives," he said sadly. "Please understand it was a hot lead on the guy and he could have gotten away again if I know all that. I know how important that mission was for you, but on that day I saw you lying on the ground in the pool of your own blood and that's an image I just can't get out of my head." Night-Eye all but shouted at his idol. Toshinori was shocked when he saw the younger man display so many emotions. But it's not your fault. I know, but I saw you lying there, dying. And I was unable to prevent it from happening. Night Eye locked eyes with a tall muscular man in the hospital gown with small tears threatening to fall from his eyes. He took a deep breath to compose himself. Even if it never happens again, I wouldn't be able to live through that feeling again, not as a hero, not as your fan, and definitely not as your friend. I am so sorry, All Might. He said as he hung his head. Then the shorter man felt a weight on his shoulder. He looked up to see his hero standing closer to him holding his shoulder. I understand what you mean and I accept your resignation. All Might said reassuringly before offering Night Eye his hand and a smile. After a quick hesitation he accepted his friend's hand and gave it a firm shake. It has been an honor working with you, All Might. And it has also been a great honor working with you, Mirai Sasaki. Toshinori responded before letting go. Night Eye gave his favorite hero a small smile before turning around and leaving the hospital room. Toshinori sighed and took a seat on his bed, putting the costume on the ground in front of himself. He looked at the red, blue, white and yellow spandex in silence, thinking about what he had to go through to reach his current status. Now he probably lost one of his closest friends, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to get him back. But it was all worth it, right? His thoughts were interrupted with a knock on the door. When they opened he was met by the friendly face of Namasa Tsukauchi. "Good morning, Toshinori," said the detective as he took off his hat and took a seat in front of the large man. "Oh hello Namasa, any news?" "Of course, and all of them are bad," said the man in trench coat which made All Might flinch a bit. "For one, we searched all throughout the complex but didn't find Shigaraki's body anywhere. We also discovered that the boy you saved had his quirk examined 2 days just before he got kidnapped. I sent some officers to bring in the doctor who did the tests for questioning, but his apartment was completely abandoned when they got there. This gives us 2 versions of the story, either Darumi Ujiko has been kidnapped and replaced by an impostor, or he was actively supporting All for One and went into hiding when he found out what happened yesterday. Which means that All for One is probably not only still alive, but that he has someone who specialized on studying quirks his entire life and had access to the quirk registry." Toshinori frowned as he was dealt another supply of bad news by another of his few friends. "I've already started preparations to add both Shigaraki and Daruma on the Interpol most wanted list, but it will take a few days for that to go through," said the detective regretfully. He knew just how much trouble these people could bring, but there was nothing more that could be done at the moment. "What about the boy and his family?" asked All Might with a hint of worry in his voice. "They should both be fine as long as this doesn't reach the public, and I've sent 2 of my officers to watch their apartment building for a few days just to be sure," responded Namasa calmly, which made All Might sigh in relief. After they discussed some minor details the detective left the hospital and Toshinori did the same, but instead of using the main entrance, he chose to jump off the roof into the night sky. The next day. Izuku was full of energy despite getting only a few hours of sleep during the night. He was happily jumping around the house dressed in his small All Might costume. At one point he even ran into the kitchen where his mother was cutting the vegetables for lunch while yelling ha ha ha. "I am here for a free samp," which Inko quickly interrupted by showing a baby carrot into his open mouth with a smile. "Thank you Fidifin," he quickly responded before running outside with a full mouth and a wide smile. He still couldn't believe that he finally had a quirk and a great one. What could be better than helping to save lives? Lunch came and went. Then came the moment for computer time. Izuku watched his favorite hero video and then some recent hero footage only to see his own face next to a headline. He quickly jumped off the chair, ran to his mom and led her to the computer to show her with sparkles in his big green eyes. But the excitement that he expected to see on her mother's face never came. Her smile vanished and her eyes opened wide with shock and horror as she read the headline. Izuku Midoriya, the boy who saved the #1 hero. Unbeknownst to them, the #1 hero was also reading the same tabloid article whilst frowning. Vultures. This is really bad. When the villains get a hold of this, the boy is as good as dead. It had little to no information except for the people involved, but the real question was, how did the reporters even get their hands on this info, and how the hell is it in the magazines already? All Might crushed the angering magazine into a tight ball and threw it into a blue trash can nearby before leaping back into the air again with a new destination in mind. Back in the apartment there was constant knocking on the door and ringing of the doorbell after multiple news vans and other vehicles with bright logos of news companies painted on them parked in front of the building. Inko wasn't very sure about what she should do. Is it okay to call the police? How did they even get our address? Then it all suddenly stopped and as the silence overtook the room she felt a small hand on her leg. Mom. Mom. Look. All Might's outside. She followed her son to a window he was so furiously pointing at. The young woman looked outside and there he was. The number one hero was standing in the street as more and more reporters surrounded him and was he slowly moving away. Her phone rang out of nowhere and they picked it up. Hello? Miss Midoriya, this is Detective Tsukauchi, we've met at the hospital, I need you to pack a bag for yourself and for your… Wait a minute, what do you mean pack a bag? We can't just… Please listen to me, I can't guarantee your safety if you stay where you are and I don't know how much time All Might can buy you. There are 2 officers in a grey car just down the road, pack your bags and get into that car, they will take you to a safe destination, I promise it's only temporary. I understand. She said a bit shaken by what she heard but ended the call, grabbed a big suitcase and started hastily filling it up with Izuku's help. Outside. And so honor is something everyone should strive to achieve. Said smiling Toshinori as he took another step back and everyone moved with him. All Might, that doesn't answer my question at all. Were you really saved by Izuku Midoriya yesterday? The reporter asked again with clear irritation in her voice. It was almost as if all the number one hero said was either complete nonsense or random catchphrases. Oh, and have I ever told you about the time when I saved those seniors from that burning building? I always flame to please. Ha ha ha. Everyone groaned audibly at the bad pun and completely missed the car behind them as it quickly drove off. Well, that's my K, you have all been great, but heroing waits for no one. He said and quickly sprinted away in a blur, leaving all of the reporters both angry and disappointed, but when they resumed their tries to interview the small family they found their apartment empty. 15 minutes later. They drove them to the police station where Namasa was already waiting in his office. Izuku was left in care of a few young policewomen who were all resisting the urge to pinch his cheeks due to his cuteness while his mother spoke to the detective. After a few minutes of explaining that no one had any idea about the source of the information leak and that there was no way to tell how long this investigation could take, he came with a proposition. The young detective pointed at a computer screen, so after this article went viral, our witness protection program became pretty much useless in your case. Simply put, there isn't a place in this country where we could successfully hide you or your son. Inko was so devastated and scared, for the second time in her life, she was completely clueless about what she should do. Now her son was in serious danger and it was all her fault. If only she stopped those villains from kidnapping her little Izuku, if only she could have known. But thankfully there isn't another option available. Now this option would grant both you and your son a chance to live your lives in relative comfort and complete safety, but it would be pretty hard to get used to. I accept. She said as her hands began to shake a little, but she was determined to go through anything at this point. Namasa smiled a bit and stood up from his chair and grabbed a folder on a nearby file cabinet. As you may know, the Hero Association launched a custom program for people just like you. The media call it the Move in Protection Program, where a family endanger lives with a professional hero. Only a handful of families have gone into this program, but so far it's had a success rate of 100%. So we would move in with a hero until the investigation gets concluded. That's right, the said hero has a perfect record and they will be compensated for any added expenses during your stay. Inko was surprised to say the least, not only would they be kept safe by a pro, but they wouldn't even have to be worried about paying the rent. And would it be okay if you told me which hero would be protecting us? She asked nervously, not wanting to inconvenience the kind man standing in front of her. The detective's smile just grew wider as he handed her the folder. Inko audibly gasped when she saw the photo of the large blonde hero with a brave smile looking at her from the photo attached to the first page. Chapter 5. So how can I help you, Toshinori? Asked Recovery Girl when she arrived to All Might's giant penthouse. Miss Shuzenji, I am so glad you are here, you see, some people will be moving in with me and I need someone to check if there are any healthcare hazards. He said with his usual ear-to-ear smile as he came to meet the doctor dressed in his bright red t-shirt with just a hero in disguise. Written on it with big bright yellow letters. Recovery Girl frowned at him and almost decided to leave. She was worried that this urgent business meant that his condition has worsened. Shy sighed and furrowed her brow. Just show me the kitchen. She said exasperatedly as she stepped inside, just hoping it wouldn't take too much of her time. Right this way, young lady. He responded cheerily as she entered his apartment before discreetly picking up a clipboard and holding behind his back just from her sight. 10 minutes later outside. Officer, are you sure this is the right place? Inko asked nervously when the police car stopped in front of an entrance to a massive skyscraper. It's what the order said, ma'am. Do you want any help with your luggage? Asked the bearded policeman. Yes, that would be very nice of you. She told him with a slight smile, to which the officer gently nodded, got out of the car and easily pulled 2 heavy stroller cases out of the car trunk while Inko gently freed her son from his seatbelt and opened the door for him and for herself. There was no mistaking it, this building was luxurious. It was a kind of place where even if you were to rent the cheapest room for a week, it would still cost you about as much as you make in a year. Izuku was still holding his mother's skirt as they walked to the elevator after being told by a friendly receptionist that they should go to the second highest floor. Once in the moving metal box, she noticed just how incredibly nervous her son was. The young boy stood there shivering, unblinking and sweating profusely. "Izuku, are you feeling okay?" she asked gently when she softly placed her hands on his shoulders and got down on his eye level. Her son stopped shaking and silently averted his eyes. "Are you sure he won't be angry with us?" he asked weakly in response while looking at the ground. His mother smiled reassuringly at him. "Sweetie, I am sure it will be fine, remember what the nice policeman said. All Might has volunteered himself." Her son gave her a small unsure smile in return just as the door opened and they got out of the elevator into a small hallway with only one door on the side across from them. Inko was reaching for the handle when the door opened on its own and a tiny old lady burst out nearly bumping into her. "Oh, you must be the boy's mother," she exclaimed as she looked up at her and then at the child standing beside her and then something in her clicked. "Wait a moment, come here sonny," she said as she gently grasped Izuku's tiny hand and spun him around before standing back to back with the small boy and comparing their height. Well, the boy was so taken aback he didn't even try to question it. Just as she thought, the child was just half an inch shorter. 20 minutes earlier. The old lady came into kitchen and immediately saw a foot-sized ketchup stain on the floor. It looked fresh and sticky. When she asked where he keeps his cleaning chemicals, he pointed to the nearest set of drawers and when she opened one of them, but the bottle was just out of her reach. Same thing happened when she tried to return a knife she found just randomly sitting on a chair to its former place. And the detergent. And each time something like that happened she caught Toshinori moving from the corner of her eye very quickly, but before she could take a good look, he was already standing perfectly still with his dumb smile. Was he testing? A small pulsating vein suddenly appeared on Chio's forehead and started angrily pulsating as she turned around and walked with quick steps filled with determination back into the penthouse, coming face to face with the number one hero. "Oh sorry All Might. It seems that I forgot my oh my god there is huge spider on your shoulder." "Where?" he exclaimed and quickly turned around exposing the hidden item which she snatched from him at blinding speed. Toshinori just stared at her with a pale face as she read the paper attached to it. Plus Ultra Child Reacability Safety Test. Cleaning supplies check. Knives and other sharp objects check. Uncovered electricity sockets check. Laundry detergent check. Toaster check. Coffee check. Spices check. Medicine check. Adult stuff check. Oh no, she knows. Yagi, but before she could finish talking All Might quickly ran out of the door at near sonic speed, jumping over the stunned family and dashing down the stairs next to the elevator with Recovery Girl hot on his heels. "You can run, but you can't hide. I am your doctor and I know where you live," she yelled in pursuit. The green-haired boy gently pulled at his mother's skirt. "What is going on, mommy?" Is All Might scared? His mother didn't have any time to respond as a window in the hallway opened, both of her suitcases were suddenly yanked away and carried inside by a red blur. "I think I lost her at the 16th floor, quickly get in before she realizes I jumped outside," he said with panic in his voice as he ushered the small family into his home before swiftly shutting the door behind them and locking it. When All Might saw the looks of his new flatmates, he took a deep calming breath, put back on his fearless smile before talking again. "I believe we should all introduce ourselves. You can call me Toshinori," All Might exclaimed as he energetically pointed at himself with his thumb. What a quick recovery. Went through Inko's head. She quickly washed the bewilderment off her face and with a slight blush answered. "My name is Inko Midoriya, but please call me Inko, everyone does." Toshinori made an eye contact with the young woman for a second and nearly got lost in her pretty green eyes before giving her a slight nod. Both of them then looked at Izuku, who was suddenly once again extremely nervous. Holding the hem of his t-shirt for dear life, shaking and looking at the carpet as if it should come alive and swallow him whole at any second. All Might saw the young child's embarrassment and he knew that he had to listen to the playful part of his mind and have some fun. "Don't worry, I already know your name, Ishimiku." Izuku twitched a bit and quickly looked up. "And no, my name is Izuku." "I am sorry, it's so hard to hear you from down there in my old age, please could you repeat that, Rizmoku?" The tall hero responded and got on one knee and put his hand next to his ear in a playful fashion. "My name is Izuku." The green-haired boy said louder right into the hero's ear and Toshinori comically fell on his back clutching both of his ears. "Oh my goodness. I think I have gone deaf, what tragedy to befall a hero. My career is most certainly over. I will have to star in commercials dressed as a giant dancing burger, oh no." He shouted in an exaggerated sad voice rolling around on the ground to Izuku's horror. The woman couldn't help herself but quietly chuckle at such a sight. After everything calmed down and the hero magically regained his hearing, he showed the family around the penthouse. It was just perfect, glistening hardwood flooring, many pretty carpets, and enough room for 8 people. There were 4 bathrooms in total, a large kitchen with latest cooking utensils, large living room, 3 guest rooms, a balcony and even an indoor sauna, the list just went. But that was just one side of the situation. The entire place seemed so lifeless and empty. It was as if no one lived here, not that there was dust and cobwebs or anything like that, it just didn't have that homey feel, at least to Inko. "Ms. Midoriya, you look worried, is there anything wrong?" Toshinori asked when he noticed her expression. She immediately smiled up at him. "No, it's just, do you live here alone?" "Well, you see, live is a strong word, I mostly just sleep here, justicing, and villains don't really have a regular schedule," All Might said as he nervously rubbed his head. Inko felt a bit sorry for the older man. It's not that he wasn't doing well for himself, he clearly was, but she couldn't imagine living such a lonely life. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard Izuku from the other room. "Mommy, come look at this." Both she and the hero rushed to see what was going on, only to find Izuku on the floor in pure ecstasy in a room which Toshinori only described as storage area without even going in. Oh no, he found it. There were All Might memorabilia everywhere, from rolled-up posters, masks and life-size copies of the hero made from paper to more obscure things like shampoos, with All Might's head as a dispenser and a whole box of candy bars called Mighties. Izuku was sitting on the carpet with boxes of small figurines all around him with little stars in his eyes. "Oh, I am so sorry, this collection must be worth a fortune," the green-haired woman said as she gently picked up her son under the shoulders from the mess he made. "No, it's fine, my sponsors always send this stuff to me every time I do a promotion, I would throw it out if I could, but then people would start going through the garbage again," he admitted with defeated expression on his face. "So why don't you try donating it?" "I would, but then I would just become a giant walking commercial for myself," he exclaimed with desperation, nearly chazzing off his smile. In that moment he remembered just how excited and nervous he was when he was making his first commercial for a small clothing brand, which ended in everyone wearing a yellow t-shirt with Plus Ultra written on them, which made him feel like a cult leader every time he stepped outside. "Can I take them?" Izuku said unsurely. Toshinori looked at the small boy, which made the boy a bit nervous again. I mean not all of them, just some for the room. I will return them afterwards, I promise," he said quietly and pointed at the door to the room he was staying in. "So pure. Why not? You know what they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure," the hero energetically responded. He was about to continue his tour but was suddenly interrupted with his own voice. "The phone call is here. The phone call is here." All Might quickly fished the phone out of his pants and brought it to his ear. "I'll be right there," he said after the voice from the other end stopped. His attention returned back to the family. "I am afraid that's all the time we have, some villain with control over asphalt is terrorizing a nearby road construction. The fridge is quite full, and I am sure you can finish the exploration on your own, good luck," he yelled as hastily entered his bedroom and came out a second later fully dressed in his attire before jumping from the balcony into the loud city bellow. Izuku quickly ran to the balcony to watch the hero flying through the air and gave him an energetic wave. "Hey Izuku, do you want any help decorating your room?" Inko asked after the child's frantic movements stopped. They spent the rest of the day decorating, had a late lunch and after that a dinner. At first they both wanted to wait for their new roommate, but after a while the boy's stomach started rumbling from hunger. At 2 a.m. Toshinori softly landed on the balcony, happy he managed to keep the family from waking up, though he was also pretty angry. He had lost more than a half of day chazzing after that villain and doing ungodly amount of paperwork. How did Night Eye get it done so fast anyway? He often relied on takeout, but since most shops were already closed, he knew he would have to put his acceptable cooking skills to a test. "I just hope it doesn't catch fire again." His stomach angrily growled as he entered the kitchen only for a heavenly smell to tickle his nose. There were 2 pots wrapped in dry blue dishcloth with a note attached to it. He snatched it and began reading. "All Might. I can't ever express how very grateful we both are for your help. We tried waiting for you, but we both got pretty hungry, had dinner, but I cooked a bit more in case you got hungry and got here late, please help yourself. Inko." He uncovered both pots, one half full of rice, the other half full of curry, and some steam hit him in the face. "How's it still warm? That woman is magical." He pulled out a plate and took a serving, then second, and then finished both pots. It was just so good. It had the exactly right amounts of salt and other spices, weight be damned. After eating, the chair he was sitting on quickly became the most comfortable place in the world and so he fell asleep. At 3 a.m. Izuku's bladder woke the sleeping boy up and he stumbled into the hallway in search of the toilet and after relieving himself he made a mistake when walking back to bed and ended up inside the hero's personal training room. The walls of the room were reinforced by strong metal. There were 5 punching bags of various sizes, a giant treadmill, an exercise bike and a humongous weight rack. This is where he trains. The green-haired boy was mesmerized by everything he looked at as he wandered through the room. Every dent and every scratch, they were all products of Hiro's rigorous training. He became so enthralled by his environment that he didn't notice a jump rope lying on the floor, which made him trip. He made a few quick steps to stabilize himself until he ran into something soft he immediately grabbed. He couldn't believe his eyes. There were not 5 punching bags, there were 6. This one was just so big he just saw it as a part of a wall. It was a huge 4 feet wide and 8 feet tall object made from black artificial leather and held up by a massive metal chain. I bet he uses it practice smashes. Izuku said in excitement. It must be so amazing to throw a smash. The boy looked at his hands and then at the bag. No, I can't do that, but he wouldn't mind if I tried, would he? The small boy looked around the room to make sure no one was watching. And then took his fighting stance. Smash. He shouted and attempted a punch only for his leg to slip and him to fall right on his butt. He blushed a little hoping there were no secret cameras in the room as he got back up on his feet. He prepared again and launched another punch with his whole body weight and this time he even made contact before the recoil from the bag forced him back down on his butt. He stood up again, but this time with a small smile. For his third try he imagined the meanest looking villain in the place of the bag. He had 8 red eyes, 7 arms with claws sharp as knives, 4 legs, purple skin and razor-sharp teeth. He took his this time improved stance, where his legs weren't so twisted around each other, held out his arm and took a running start. Smash. He shouted as his tiny fist made contact again and this time the villain punching bag actually moved. It in fact moved so much that it made contact with the ceiling with enough force to dislodge it from its hook and fall on the metal ground with a loud crash, which woke up everyone in the penthouse. Alright, this is where we end this part. If you are interested in the next part, leave a comment and like the video. See you later.